It started with a single sentence. One phrase that sent the internet into chaos. Charlie Kirk got shot. The words came out fast, trembling, almost unbelievable. Moments later, the disbelief turned to confusion. And then to anger. Because before the story could even settle, another voice, calm, skeptical, unmistakable, entered the conversation. Joe Rogan. He leaned into his mic and said the words that would fracture the internet. This story doesn't make sense. And just like that, the quiet grief surrounding the death of one of America's most outspoken political figures transformed into something far more complicated. A web of mystery, power, and silence, one that now reaches all the way from a crowded memorial arena to the office of former President Donald Trump. At first, it seemed like a tragedy, a shocking, senseless moment caught in the middle of a public tour. But what began as mourning quickly turned into a movement of questions. Questions that no one seemed ready to answer. Because Rogan wasn't just doubting the investigation. He was pointing towards something no one dared to say out loud. Why was every piece of this story moving so fast? And fitting together so perfectly? And why, in the middle of it all, did every thread seem to lead back to one name? Erica Kirk, the grieving widow who, within days, stepped into her husband's place. The woman whose silence speaks louder than any press release. And the one person whose story may hold the key to everything. What really happened to Charlie Kirk? And how did a single whisper from Joe Rogan turn one man's death into a political earthquake? Because in today's world, the truth isn't always hidden. Sometimes it's broadcast right in front of us. We just have to decide if we're willing to see it. When Joe Rogan speaks, the internet listens. Not because he's always right, but because he's not afraid to say what everyone else is thinking. So when the news broke about Charlie Kirk's death, and Rogan leaned back in his chair with that familiar skeptical look, the kind that says, something's off here, millions of people knew this wasn't going to stay quiet. On his podcast, the moment was almost casual. He was mid-conversation when someone mentioned the official report, the bizarre detail about a World War I rifle supposedly used in the attack. The story claimed the weapon was an antique, taken apart, smuggled in, and reassembled on site. Rogan paused, then laughed. Okay, interesting. That one word, interesting, became the spark. To his fans, it wasn't just amusement. It was disbelief. The kind of disbelief that says, "You expect us to believe this?" Within minutes, the clip spread like wildfire. Thousands of reposts, millions of views. Because Rogan's tone, calm but cutting, said more than any accusation could. He started asking the questions no one else was asking. How did the suspect get to the roof? Why was security so light at a high-profile political event? And how, in a world of drones, scanners, and surveillance, did no one notice? You're telling me nobody saw a guy setting up on a rooftop? That's insane. It was classic Rogan, a mix of humor, logic, and cynicism. But this time it hit a nerve. The more he questioned, the more people started to look closer. Online forums exploded. Viewers rewound his words, reading between every syllable. Because when Rogan said, "This story doesn't make sense," what people heard was, "There's more to this than they're telling us." And then came the question that shifted the focus entirely. If this wasn't random, who stood to gain the most? For the first time, eyes began turning. Not toward the suspect, not toward investigators, but toward someone much closer to home. Someone who was suddenly in the center of everything, Erica Kirk. And just like that, what started as a tragedy became something else entirely. A puzzle, a symbol, and for many, a potential setup hiding in plain sight. Because in a world obsessed with optics, timing, and narratives, nothing ever looks like an accident for long. The internet didn't wait for answers. It created its own. Within hours of Joe Rogan's podcast going viral, thousands of digital detectives were already digging, not into the suspect, not into the police report, but into the woman who, until then, had stayed completely silent. Erica Kirk, the widow. The new face of Turning Point USA. And suddenly, the centerpiece of a story that seemed to be writing itself. She wasn't just another grieving spouse. She was young, articulate, photogenic, and, to many, strangely composed. In every photo from the memorial, her eyes were dry, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable. It wasn't grief that caught people's attention. It was poise, and when the organization her late husband founded announced that she would be stepping in as CEO, barely days after his funeral, the conversation took a darker turn. Too fast, too convenient, almost prepared. Those were the kinds of comments flooding timelines. It wasn't just the promotion that shocked people, it was the timing. The announcement came the same week Rogan questioned the official story. Almost like the power vacuum had been filled before anyone even realized there was one. But the real twist? Erica wasn't an unknown figure. Long before she became Erica Kirk, she was Erica France, a former beauty queen who once competed in the Miss USA pageant back when the contest was owned by Donald Trump. That revelation cracked the internet wide open. Theories multiplied overnight. Threads began connecting old photos, archived interviews, charity galas, and even campaign fundraisers. Every image that placed Erica and Trump in the same orbit, however distant, became fuel for a narrative too intriguing to ignore. Because in the world of politics and media, coincidences rarely stay coincidences for long. The more people looked, the more they found, or thought they found, hidden connections, shared circles, mutual donors, overlapping appearances. And for Rogan's massive audience, that was all it took. His single line, "This story doesn't make sense," now seemed like a warning. A whisper suggesting that what happened to Charlie Kirk might not have been random at all, but part of a larger play. Erica's calmness became her mystery, her silence her shield, and her sudden rise, from widow to leader, the spark that kept every theory alive. Because while the world mourned Charlie Kirk, the question everyone was too afraid to ask grew louder. Had Erica always been destined to take his place? Or did tragedy open a door that was already waiting for her? One thing was certain. This story was no longer about loss. It was about power, and the next public appearance would turn that suspicion into a global obsession. It was supposed to be a farewell. A somber, sacred moment of grief. The final goodbye to a man whose life had moved millions. But instead, it became one of the most dissected videos in the world. The memorial service for Charlie Kirk was broadcast live to millions of viewers. A sea of people in the arena, lights dimmed, music soft, screens glowing with his image. The founder of Turning Point USA, gone too soon. Among the crowd sat senators, pastors, and political leaders. But when Donald Trump walked up to the podium, the air changed. His tone was calm, almost gentle. He spoke of legacy, of faith, of Charlie's unshakable belief in the American spirit. Every sentence echoed through the room like a sermon. But what happened after the speech is what no one could stop talking about. As the applause thundered and cameras flashed, Trump turned to Erica. She was standing just a few steps away. Elegant, black dress, eyes fixed on the stage. He reached out, wrapped his arms around her, and whispered something in her ear. No one could hear what he said. But everyone saw her reaction. She trembled, smiled faintly, and whispered something back. The embrace lasted a few seconds too long enough for millions of viewers to notice, and in those seconds, a new narrative was born. Social media caught fire. Clips of the hug spread like sparks across platforms. People slowed the footage down, frame by frame, searching for clues in her eyes, in his hands, in the way her fingers brushed against his shoulder. Was it comfort? Or was it something more? Because in that silence, between the tears and the whispers, something about the moment didn't feel like pure grief. It felt unrehearsed. Some said it was nothing, just empathy, human compassion. But others saw it differently. They claimed it was a signal, a performance, a display of unity meant for the cameras. And when a close-up showed Erica tilting her head upward, eyes glistening, Forming what looked like an I love you sign with her hand, the internet erupted. Was it a message to her late husband? Or a coded gesture meant for someone else? Conspiracy channels froze the clip, circled her hand in red, and zoomed in like it was evidence in a case. The video views crossed tens of millions in less than a day. Within hours, the entire conversation shifted. People weren't talking about Charlie Kirk anymore. They were talking about them. About Trump and Erica. About looks, body language, unspoken words. For some, it was just an emotional moment taken out of context. But to others, it was the first crack in a carefully painted image. The glimpse of something hidden behind the grief. And for those who remembered Erica's Miss USA passed under Trump's ownership, the question became impossible to ignore. Had this connection been there all along? Because if it had, then what looked like a moment of comfort might have been something else entirely, a signal of alignment, power, or something deeper. And while the world argued over gestures and glances, a darker theory began to take shape online, that this wasn't just coincidence, that this story was being choreographed. Before Erica Kirk became the face of Turning Point USA, before the black dress, the spotlight, and the whisper that ignited 1,000 theories, she was someone else. Erica France, a name that once shimmered beneath the glittering lights of the Miss USA stage. The year was 2012. The pageant was owned and controlled by none other than Donald Trump. Back then, Trump was known for being everywhere, backstage, at rehearsals, at press conferences, greeting contestants with that trademark smile. He prided himself on being hands-on. Every camera flash, every introduction went through him, and among the hundreds of hopeful faces, there she was. Contestant number 23 from Arizona. Tall, confident, and effortlessly composed. Erica France wasn't just another contestant. She had a glow that demanded attention. Trump noticed her. People backstage said it was obvious. The way he leaned in during introductions, the compliments, the extra few seconds of conversation. There's no proof of a deeper connection, no document, no witness statement. But in the world of power, sometimes the things that aren't written down tell the loudest stories. After the pageant ended, Erica didn't fade into obscurity like most contestants. She stayed in the orbit of influence, charity galas, political dinners, fundraisers. And often, those events had something in common: Trump's presence. It was a glamorous world, where business, media, and politics blended into one long spotlight. And that's where Erica learned the unspoken rules: timing, presentation, control. Fast forward years later, that same woman reappears, now under a different name. Erica Kirk, the wife of one of America's most influential young conservatives. A partner to a man who built a movement, and who, by all accounts, trusted her completely. But after his passing, the old threads began to re-emerge. People dug up old footage, photos, press releases from the Miss USA archives. And suddenly, what once seemed like a harmless coincidence started to look like a hidden connection that never truly ended. Did Trump already know her? Was there ever communication between them after the pageant? Or did fate bring them back together now, at the exact moment of political opportunity? No one could say for sure. But one thing was undeniable. Their paths had crossed before, long before Charlie Kirk ever entered the picture. And when Erica appeared beside Trump once more, this time not as a contestant but as a leader, people couldn't help but wonder if that circle was ever really broken. Because maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the start of something new. Maybe it was the continuation of something planned years ago. And as if to prove that theory right, what happened next would send shockwaves through the conservative world. The moment Erica officially stepped into the role once held by her husband, and the entire narrative changed from mourning to power. Grief, they say, changes people. But in Erica Kirk's case, it seemed to transform her entirely. Just weeks after her husband's death, the headlines changed overnight. What began as "America mourns Charlie Kirk" suddenly became "Erica Kirk steps forward." The board of Turning Point USA, the conservative organization Charlie had built from the ground up, announced that his widow would take over as the new CEO, unanimously. No debate, no hesitation, no delay. To many, it felt like the natural continuation of his legacy, the wife carrying the torch. But to others, it felt too perfect, too quick, too clean. Like a plan executed with precision, not passion. Even Joe Rogan's followers began connecting dots. On social media, threads questioned how such a major leadership decision could happen so soon after a funeral. How meetings, votes, and press coordination could have taken place while the family was still in mourning. Some commenters didn't buy it. "That wasn't grief," one wrote. "That was a transition." And then, Donald Trump entered the conversation again. At a rally just weeks later, Trump broke his silence, and his words carried unmistakable weight. Charlie was a fighter, but his wife, Erica, she's a warrior. The crowd erupted, but the tone was different. It didn't sound like sympathy. It sounded like endorsement. As if in one sentence, Trump had publicly anointed her as the rightful heir to Charlie's empire. Cameras flashed, commentators speculated, and suddenly, Erica Kirk wasn't just a widow. She was being spoken about as a rising political figure. Her first public appearance as CEO sealed that image. She walked onto the stage dressed entirely in black, strong posture, eyes steady, her voice unwavering. It wasn't the broken tone of someone still in pain. It was the voice of a woman stepping into her power. "You have no idea," she said, "of the fire this woman carries within her. This widow's voice will be heard around the world." The audience cheered, but the internet paused. Because to many, that line didn't sound like grief. It sounded like a campaign launch. Her speech was perfectly lit, flawlessly delivered, and captured from multiple angles, as if the moment had been rehearsed. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. Confident, calculated, charismatic. Every gesture felt like a declaration of strength, but also a statement of arrival. Was this a tribute to her husband's memory, or the first step in building something entirely her own? Within days, political pundits began calling her the new face of the conservative movement. Fundraising pages were updated with her name. Her social media followers tripled, and invitations began arriving. Conferences, dinners, private summits, all under one banner, Erica Kirk. Meanwhile, Trump continued to show public support. He called her remarkable, strong, and a leader of great faith. Every time he mentioned her, the audience grew louder, and the rumors grew deeper. Because in politics, nothing is random. Every handshake, every glance, every word of praise means something. And the timing of Trump's embrace, from the memorial to her first stage appearance, made even Rogan's skeptics start to wonder, had this all been part of a larger plan? A seamless passing of the torch, disguised as tragedy? Whether that's true or not, one thing was clear. Erica Kirk wasn't fading into the background. She was stepping into the spotlight. And the moment she did, the entire conversation about Charlie's death changed. It was no longer about loss. It was about who benefited from it. Because in the theater of politics, every tragedy has two stories. The one they tell the public, and the one that plays out behind the curtain. It started as a whisper, then it became a question. And soon, it turned into a full-scale digital investigation that no one could stop. The internet wasn't waiting for official reports anymore. It was building its own. Reddit threads turned into detective boards. Twitter became a live timeline of suspicion. TikTok videos slowed every second of footage from the memorial service, frame by frame, like forensic evidence. Someone zoomed in on Trump's hand placement during the hug. Another analyzed Erica's blink rate, claiming it revealed emotional control. A third video stitched together every public photo of them in chronological order, mapping what they called the evolution of a coded relationship. What started as curiosity had morphed into obsession. And the strangest part? No one could agree on what they were actually looking for. Some said it was proof of a cover-up, that Charlie Kirk's death was part of something larger. Others believed it was all coincidence, grief twisted by the internet's hunger for scandal. But regardless of what side people were on, one fact united them all: the silence. Erica Kirk said nothing. Donald Trump said nothing. Even Joe Rogan, whose podcast had lit the fire, didn't comment again, and that silence only made the noise louder. Each day without a statement gave birth to a dozen new theories. Influencers analyzed tone, body language, seating positions, even the distance between people at events. Some users began building digital maps, arrows, notes, names, red circles, like something out of a conspiracy documentary. "Look here," one thread said. "Trump's security detail forms a triangle around her. That's not random." "She's wearing black again," another noted. "Same brooch, same angle as the memorial. Symbolism." People weren't just following the story, they were reconstructing it in real time. And the more they analyzed, the less anyone trusted the official narrative. One YouTuber posted a 40-minute breakdown titled, "The Power Play Behind the Funeral." Another account went viral for comparing Erica's rise to the making of a political queen. Even mainstream outlets started to notice. Reporters called it a digital manhunt for meaning. Because while police were investigating the shooter, the public was investigating the symbolism. Every new clip added fuel to the storm. A handshake became proof. A smile became strategy. And a moment of silence became confirmation. By now, Erica's image was everywhere. News covers, Twitter threads, podcast thumbnails, late-night monologues. She had become a symbol, both of resilience and of suspicion. To her supporters, she was a woman defying tragedy, leading with grace. To her critics, she was the center of a political play, a figure in a game much bigger than she realized. But perhaps the most haunting part of it all was how quickly empathy had vanished. People forgot that behind the cameras was still a woman who had lost her husband. Instead, they turned her grief into data, her silence into evidence, and her every appearance into a performance. As Joe Rogan once said, "We've turned tragedy into entertainment." And that's exactly what was happening. Still, one question lingered in the air, one that kept Rogan's followers restless. If this story truly didn't make sense, what was the part that everyone was missing? Because even in a storm of rumors and theories, there was still something deeper, something off. A thread of truth hiding in the noise, waiting for someone brave enough to pull it. And the next time Rogan opened his mouth about the case, he did exactly that. In the chaos of rumors and theories, Erica Kirk said nothing. No denials, no clarifications, just images, polished, composed, and deliberate. To her supporters, silence meant strength. To her critics, it meant control. Each appearance beside Donald Trump deepened the intrigue. Smiles became symbols. Gestures became messages. Their silence, a shared language no one could translate. And as the internet roared, Joe Rogan's voice echoed again. This world is strange. And silence sometimes is louder than words. That silence became Erica's greatest weapon. While others argued she evolved, from widow to leader, from grief to power. Whether by fate or design, she had stepped into the center of a storm and learned to command it,